I retired and bought a house in Mallorca to rest. Then my daughter-in-law called. My brother will move in there. If you do not like it, sell the house. But when they showed up with a moving truck, they discovered what this old electrician had prepared for them. If this story resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments which city you're watching from. We'd love to know where our community is growing. I spent 38 years pulling cables through walls, calculating power cross-sections, and dealing with other people's short circuits just to be able to finally stop completely, not to slow down, but to stop dead, like a circuit breaker that trips from an overload. The kind of stop where you wake up without an alarm. And the only thing you have to decide before noon is whether to have coffee on the front porch looking at the mountain or on the back terrace listening to the water. That was the plan. That's what I'd earned with every electrical panel assembled under suffocating heat. It took me 14 months of intensive searching to find the right property in the foothills of the Sierra de Tramontana in Mallorca. About 4 hectares of land in the hills, about 20 minutes from Palenque, a true 2-story country house someone had built in 1962 and maintained with a discipline I, as a professional, could only admire. The house was solid. Hardwood floors, a sandstone fireplace that is the soul of the island, a porch wrapping around the structure, and a pond in the back stocked with trout that the previous owner, a man of few words from Mallorca, swore he'd never finish catching. I paid $285,000 for it in cash. Every euro came from 38 years of early mornings, of night shifts, of lost weekends and canceled vacations because the wiring of a hospital or an office wasn't finished, and I wasn't the kind of man to leave a job half done. The signing before a notary in Palma lasted 40 minutes. The trip from Madrid took about 6 hours, including the ferry from Denia. When I drove up the gravel path in my old van and turned off the engine, I just sat there for a while with the windows down, listening to the silence. A woodpecker somewhere deep in the home oak grove, the wind moving across the ridge above. Nothing else. I was 64 years old, and for the first time I felt I didn't have to go anywhere else. I spent the first 3 weeks doing nothing a foreman would consider useful. I fished in the pond every morning, learning the corners where the most elusive trout hid. I read books I'd been carrying in a tool bag for a decade, waiting to have time for something other than technical manuals. I drove to town to buy bread or tools, introduced myself to the neighbors unhurriedly, and found it deeply satisfying. My neighbor to the north, a man named Jordy, who raised goats and made his own Tupi cheese, brought me a jar of amber-colored honey. One afternoon we sat on the porch and barely spoke at all. I liked him right away. In Mallorca, silence is a form of respect. My son called on Sunday. Marcos was 33, worked in logistics management in Madrid, and had married his wife Lucia 4 years earlier. It had been a quiet wedding, about 60 people at a vineyard outside the city. Back then, I quite liked Lucia. She was organized and self-assured, the kind of woman who sent thank-you notes in under 48 hours and remembered how everyone took their coffee. What I hadn't fully grasped yet was that those qualities, when twisted, become tools of control. "How's the hermit life, Dad?" he asked. "Perfect," I told him. This morning I pulled out 3 beautiful trout. I lost one that was bigger than all 3 combined. He laughed, a laugh that sounded a bit forced through the speakerphone. Lucia's parents are in the city this week. They came down from Asturias. Sergio is with them. Sergio was Lucia's younger brother, 29, who was permanently between projects. He had a girlfriend named Marta, who changed careers almost as often as Sergio changed phone numbers. He was the kind of person who spoke with great confidence about cryptocurrencies or real estate without having contributed a single day to Social Security. He had a talent for making his failures sound like strategic pivots. "That's great," I said, though I sensed a short circuit. "How long are they staying?" "Just a week. The parents are at a hotel downtown. Sergio and Marta are on the sofa bed at our place." He took a heavy pause. "It's been a bit cramped, Dad. A lot of built-up tension." "I can imagine," I replied, suspecting the sofa bed wasn't the only problem. We talked about his logistics job and a new contract that would keep him busy until autumn. When we hung up, I stayed on the back terrace watching the pond stay still under the heat of the Mallorcan afternoon. I felt uncomplicated happiness. It lasted exactly 11 more days. Lucia's call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on the porch with a mystery novel, and when I saw her name on the screen, I knew the piece was over. Alejandro. Her voice had that silky undertone I recognize from contractors trying to convince you to wear a holiday for free. I wanted to talk to you about something before Marcos does, just so we're all on the same page. Sure, I said, closing the book. Sergio and Marta are in a tough spot. Their lease in Valencia ended, and the new place they were going to fell through. They need somewhere to stay for a few months while they get back on their feet. She took a calculated pause. Your country house has a lot of space. 3 bedrooms upstairs, plus the study. Marcos and I thought it makes all the sense in the world for them to settle there for a while. I put my coffee down on the stone table. Lucia, I said with the flat voice of someone measuring a dangerous voltage. I moved here 3 weeks ago. I know, and I know the timing isn't ideal, but Sergio is family. In fact, he came up with the idea of using the property for luxury tourist rentals like Airbnb when you aren't there. He could manage it and generate passive income for you. There was the trap. My refuge wasn't just a place to live. It was a business opportunity they'd already chopped up in their heads. I don't need income, I said. I bought this property for my retirement, not to run a hotel. You don't need 3 bedrooms, Alejandro. You are a single person. That phrase hurt me more than any insult. A single person, as if my hard-earned solitude subtracted my right over my own house. Lucia, I earned this property, I said firmly. Every square meter of wiring and every stone in this wall. Nobody is questioning that. Her tone grew sharp. But family makes sacrifices, and it would mean a lot to Marcos if his family united on this. Does Marcos know you're calling me to ask this? The half-second silence was the legal confirmation I needed. We discussed it, she lied. Well, I'd like to hear that from his mouth, Lucia. Her voice dropped an octave, turning cold. I hope you don't turn this into an unnecessary conflict. Sergio just needs a chance. And you are sitting alone on 4 hectares of land. Yes, I said, looking towards the mountain, and I'm doing it deliberately. Goodbye, Lucia. I hung up, went into the house, and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow grid notepad I kept next to the fruit bowl. It was the same kind of pad I'd used on job sites for 38 years to calculate loads, cable cross-sections, and material budgets. In my trade, if you don't write down the wire color and where it goes, you end up starting a fire. This time I wrote a single sentence at the top of the first page. Property exclusion protocol. I drew a firm line underneath it and started breaking down the situation as if it were a short circuit in a homeowners association. Marcos called the next morning very early. His voice sounded like when he was 15 and had broken a window playing soccer, hoping I hadn't noticed the mess yet. Dad, did you talk to Lucia last night? He asked bluntly. Yes, I answered while checking the boiler pressure. It was a short conversation. I told her no. With the same clarity, a circuit breaker cuts the power. Dad, Sergio is really in a bad place. I know he isn't your favorite person, that his lifestyle clashes with yours, but he is family. Marcos, tell me something professional to professional. Has Sergio ever kept a job for more than 18 months? The silence on the other end of the line was my answer. I don't say this to be cruel, son. I'm asking because I want to understand the control panel of the situation. Your wife called me to demand I give my house to her brother and his girlfriend, a house I bought 3 weeks ago after almost 4 decades of breaking my back on roofs. I think I have the right to understand the whole picture. It will be temporary, Dad. Just a few months for them to breathe. Is that what Lucia said about the Airbnb idea too? Do I look like a hotel receptionist to you? More silence. Then grudgingly, Marcos admitted. He mentioned it as a possibility just to help cover the estate's maintenance costs. My costs. I asked calmly, or theirs. Marcos, I am not mad at you. I am asking logical questions. I love you, and my door will always be open to you. But the answer is a resounding no. What worries me is knowing if you agree with your wife in this ambush, or if she made that call on her own. There was a pause so long, I thought the connection dropped. I told her I'd think about it. He finally whispered, That isn't the same as agreeing, son. In my world, thinking about it on a critical installation is asking for a big problem. No, he said softly. It isn't. We ended the call with that tense politeness that precedes storms. I made more coffee and stood by the window, watching a pair of fallow deer cross the edge of the home oak forest, right on the property's north pasture. My hands were steady. I wanted them to stay that way. That afternoon, I went down to Palenque and straight to an industrial hardware store. I bought 3 high-end outdoor surveillance cameras, motion sensors, infrared night vision, and direct mobile connection via 4G. The clerk, a man my age with weathered hands, asked if I had problems with poachers. Mostly two-legged fallow deer, I said with a half smile. I like to monitor who enters my network. He nodded with that rural Mallorcan wisdom. You're doing the right thing here. Property is sacred. On the way back, I stopped at the property registry to confirm there were no pending charges and requested an updated simple note. Then I headed to Patricia Valdez's office, and Orty had recommended her to me as the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste time with frills. Her office smelled of old paper and definitive decisions. She listened to me for 8 minutes without interrupting, taking notes on a digital tablet. In Spain, and specifically with Balearic regulations, you have the absolute right of exclusion, Patricia stated. You do not need to justify why you don't want guests. If there isn't a lease or explicit permission, any entry is trespassing. And if they show up here claiming their family, if they enter against your will, call the civil guard immediately. Do not argue with them. Let the agents file the report. That is pure gold in a courtroom. My daughter-in-law is the type to escalate conflicts. I added, fear she might file some complaint for coercion or something similar. Document everything. Patricia looked me in the eyes seriously. Every call, every WhatsApp, every voice memo. I want a paper trail starting today. I paid $100 as a retainer. It was the best money spent of my retirement. I installed the cameras that same afternoon, using my electrical knowledge to hide the wiring under the eaves. One at the driveway entrance, camouflaged in a home oak. Another in the garage, pointing at the main entrance, and the last one covering the back terrace and the pond. I logged every angle in my notebook with date and time. That night, I called Marcos. He was in a different room than Lucia. I knew because of the echo and the absence of TV noise. Listen to me carefully. Son, my house is your house always, but Sergio and Marta aren't setting foot here. If Lucia keeps pushing, she'll only manage to break the relationship. My refusal is firm. There are no nuances. I hear you, Dad, he said with a broken voice. How are you, Marcos? Tired? He confessed. Tired in a way I don't know how to explain, as if I had a power leak I can't find. I know that kind of breakdown, I told him tenderly. Come see me whenever you want, just you. 4 days later, the phone vibrated in my pocket. Motion alert at the entrance. A white rental van was coming up the gravel driveway. I saw the image in real time. Sergio at the wheel, parking with an arrogance that turned my stomach. He got out and stared at the facade with the look of someone appraising loot, not someone admiring a home. Marta got out on the passenger side, pointing towards the porch, probably planning where to put her patio furniture. They had a moving van. They had taken my surrender for granted. I met them on the porch steps with my arms crossed. Sergio's smile was pure theater. Alejandro, what a wonderful place. Lucia told us you'd have the rooms ready for us. We didn't want to warn you, so as not to make work. We thought of settling in directly and surprising you. Sergio, I said, stepping down a step. Not one step further. He stopped dead. I said no to Lucia. I said no to my son. Nobody said no to you, because nobody in their right mind would think you'd show up here with a van uninvited. Marta's smile evaporated, revealing an icy expression. Look, Alejandro. There must have been a miscommunication. Sergio started with a conciliatory tone. There is no misunderstanding. I was crystal clear. Lucia decided to ignore my refusal, but my house is not a public good. We've driven for Valencia. It's almost a 10-hour trip with the ferry. Marta blurted out with a sharp tone. I'm sorry you've wasted your time based on lies, I replied. But you aren't coming in. There's a boarding house 12 kilometers away in town. I suggest you go there before it gets dark. Sergio stepped closer, lowering his voice as if we were buddies. Come on. Man, Lucia is your family. You're going to leave your own people on the street out of silly pride. You and I have met 3 times in our lives, I reminded him. That doesn't make you my people. It makes you a stranger trying to invade my property, and my patience has a very low amp limit today. Leave. Sergio's mask broke. Lucia was right. You're a grumpy, difficult old man. Always have been. Could be, I said, pointing to the cameras he hadn't seen. But I'm a grumpy old man in his own house. And I have the lawyer and the civil guard call away. You have 5 minutes to turn that van around. They left cursing, arguing loudly with each other. I noted the exact time. 14:47. I saved the video clip to the cloud. Lucia's calls started within an hour. 3 missed calls. 3 voicemails I listened to on speakerphone while preparing dinner. The first was pure fire. The second, a cheap legalistic argument. The third, an icy whisper. You have humiliated my family, Alejandro. Marcos and I are going to seriously reconsider if someone with your lack of empathy should be part of our future life. Think about it carefully. I saved the audios and sent them to Patricia Valdez. Her reply was immediate. Impeccable. Keep documenting. Do not reply to anything. Marcos called at night. He sounded like he'd taken a physical beating. Lucia is beside herself. Dad, she says Sergio is crying in a roadside boarding house. He's a man of almost 30. Marcos, a man who tried to assault my retirement by force. There was a dead silence. Dad, why was Sergio so convinced you'd let him in? That's what I don't understand. Why did he make that trip if you told us no? That, I said sadly, is the question that's going to define your marriage. Son, and it is Lucia who you should ask. For the next 2 weeks, I did what I'd always done when an electrical schematic presented intermittent faults. Look for the current leak. I wasn't aggressive. I was thorough. An old colleague from Madrid who'd retired from the police force the year before and now worked as a forensic expert and private investigator was an expert at following the money trail. I called him for a preventive job. I need the financial map of Sergio and Marta Hernandez. I told him, and any connection to my son's accounts. All legal, but I want to see the power flow. Give me 10 days. Alejandro. In the digital world, nobody completely erases their tracks. 8 days later, I received the report. I printed it and read it at the kitchen table where I used to calculate renovation budgets. Sergio Hernandez had a final judgment against him for $18,400 from Valencia court. The result of unpaid rent and structural damage to an apartment. Besides, he'd accumulated 2 civil lawsuits for procedural fraud, though they'd been shelved for lack of conclusive evidence. But the most alarming thing wasn't his past, but my son's present. The report detailed a constant drip from Marcos and Lucia's joint account to a BISM account linked to Marta's number. 7 transfers in 9 months. The total amounted to $41,000. I stared at the figure while my coffee got cold. $41,000. My son earned a good salary in logistics. But that amount wasn't pocket change. It was a down payment on an apartment, the savings of 5 years of effort. Someone had designed a drainage system, so the money would leave in amounts of 500 or 600 euros, enough not to trigger the bank's money laundering alarms, but with the necessary constancy to empty an account. I call my contact again and trace that Marcos authorized this. The account is joint Alejandro. Legally, he's responsible for every movement. Whether he checked the statements or whether she gave him access to the banking app is another story. In these cases, breach of trust is the insulation that fails. I remembered Marcos's voice, tired in a way I can't explain. I put the report in my critical faults folder along with Lucia's audios. I sat on the porch and watched the trout ripple in the lower part of the pond. I thought of the boy who used to hand me screwdrivers standing on a paint bucket, and of the man who was now being looted in his own home. Lucia's thrust came on a Thursday in the form of a certified envelope. It was a notification from the Balearic Department of Social Affairs. Someone had filed a complaint alleging I was an elderly adult at risk, isolated with possible signs of cognitive decline and manifest vulnerability. They requested a welfare check to evaluate my capacity for self-governance. I called Patricia Valdez immediately. This is an instrumental or retaliatory complaint, she explained with an icy voice. It's an old tactic to legally incapacitate someone or at least generate such a level of stress they end up giving in to family pressure. Patricia, can I recite the low-voltage electrotechnical regulation from memory, from protections to grounding? My mental health has more continuity than their internet connection. She let out a dry laugh. Perfect. Let the inspector see that precision. Document who you think instigated this. The harassment pattern is what will give us victory in court if this escalates. The inspector, a young man named Mark, spent 45 minutes at my house. He checked the organization of my tools in the garage, which were sorted by gauge and use, and the cleanliness of the kitchen. I offered him coffee and answered him with the precision of a voltmeter. Is there any recent family conflict? Mark asked while noting on his tablet. My daughter-in-law and her brother tried to occupy this house 2 weeks ago. I told him calmly. I have the security footage of the moving van, the audios of their threats after my refusal, and my lawyer's report. They're trying to force a need for care to take control of my estate. Mark stopped writing and looked at me with respect. The initial report was sent from an IP located in a northern Madrid neighborhood. He commented casually, Mr. Hernandez, you are one of the most lucid and organized people I've visited in this position. I'll close this file before Friday. The inspection was archived, but the pressure changed phase. The next move was through Marcos. He called on a Wednesday night, and his voice was an exposed wire about to throw sparks. Dad, Lucia and I have been talking. She's very worried about your isolation. She thinks you should sell the country house and look for something more manageable. She's seen some active adult communities near Palma with medical services and 24-hour security. Is she listening to this call? Marcos? Silence. She's in the living room. Yes, Marcos, look me in the eyes, even if you can't see me. Do you want me to sell my retirement? No, he whispered, and I could hear the weight of a chain breaking. I don't want to. Then tell Lucia my health is unbeatable and my house isn't for sale. And now listen, I need you to do something for yourself. Tomorrow, when you're alone in the office, download the bank statements of the joint account for the last 18 months. Look at all of them one by one, especially the buys and movements. Why? Dad, what's wrong with the money? Because I love you and because a short circuit is fixed by finding the burned wire. We'll talk tomorrow. He didn't call that day or the next. On the second, early morning at 7:15, the phone roared. Marcos was in a parking lot. You could hear the echo and his heavy breathing. Dad, his voice was broken. 41,000 have vanished. I've followed the trail. Transfers to Marta to a shell company of Sergio's. Lucia has been moving money behind my back for 2 years. It was the fund for our house. Dad, the savings of our entire married life. I got up and walked to the window. The morning sun hit the Sierra de Tramontana, tinting the rocks an electric orange. I know. Son, I have the expert's report here with me. I wanted you to see it with your own eyes, so nobody could tell you I made it up. She's been lying to me every night, looking me in the face. Come to Mallorca, I told him authoritatively. Take the first flight or ferry. Come alone. We'll sit on this porch, put all the wires on the table, and decide how to rebuild the electrical panel of your life. But come now. He arrived on Friday night. I had dinner ready when his car appeared on the gravel path. Steaks from the Palenque butcher shop, corn from Jordy's garden, and an almond cake. A Mallorcan gato the hardware store lady insisted I take upon learning my son was visiting. Marcos sat at the table and ate with the silent desperation of a man who hadn't eaten a bite in days. I suspect it was exactly like that. We talked until dawn. I spread the documents on the wooden table as if they were the blueprints of a complex installation and went over every point. The BISM transfers, the phantom activity license, the judgments for non-payment in Valencia, and the images of the van in my driveway. I played Lucia's audios for him. Marcos didn't say much. He asked precise questions, looking for the flaw in the calculation, until he finally buried his head in his hands. I let him be. Silence is sometimes the only insulation that works. She knew about the estate because Sergio told her it was the perfect asset for his Airbnb racket. He finally said with a hollow voice, "She dropped it to me months ago as a random comment. I didn't understand she had already designed the assault scheme. She drew a load plan. I replied. From her perspective, it was logical. Your apartment in Madrid is urban and small. My house in the Tramontana is the ideal setting for luxury tourist rental. She needed me to yield to install her brother as manager. When I flipped the breaker to OFF, the system collapsed and she forced the machine. He got up and walked to the window. When did you know she wasn't the wiring she seemed to be? I didn't know for sure, I confessed. I had power leaks, doubts, but I didn't have the multimeter in hand. And you loved her. If I had told you something without proof, you would have thought it was typical fatherly suspicion. She would have convinced you I was the problem. I stood next to him, facing the darkness of the mountain. It's better this way, son. Did you find the fault yourself? The truth one discovers on their own has a much more resistant cable cross-section than what others tell you. Marco stayed until Sunday. We didn't touch the subject of finances again. We fished for trout in the pond in the morning, returning them to the water with a respect only those who have lost something value. We walked along the ridge of the Sierra, where the air is so clean it feels like you can see the future. At dusk, we sat on the porch watching the storm clouds gather over the Puig Tomir. When he left, he hugged me with a strength I hadn't remembered since he was a boy. I'm going to talk to a lawyer in Madrid tomorrow, he said firmly. Talk to Patricia Valdez too, I suggested. She already has the spools thread here on the island. Thank you for not giving in, Dad. If you let them in, I would never have looked at the statements. I would have kept living in a permanent short circuit. You deserve a clean installation, Marcos. Nothing less. I watched him drive away until his taillights disappeared around the curve of the secondary road. I went inside, poured myself some cognac, and went out to the terrace. The frogs were croaking, and the air smelled of pine and wet earth. For hectares of earned silence. It hadn't been the peace I imagined when retiring, but it had been a necessary fight so the rest of my days would have liked. Lucia's counteroffensive was predictable. First, a letter from a Madrid law firm claiming the money donated to her parents was part of a family financial planning strategy and that my estate could be subject to investigation in the liquidation of marital assets. Patricia Valdez replied with a brief so technical and sharp it took away their desire to litigate there in less than a week. My property was a private asset, bought with money prior to any conflict and with no connection whatsoever to their schemes. Then came a call from Lucia's mother. She cried appealing to family and the opportunity to fix things. With all due respect, I told her, I am not destroying anything. I just put the padlock on my door. What your daughter did later, the false report to social services, the diversion of $41,000 are her decisions. I have the audios and the proofs. She's not a bad person, Alejandro. She stammered, I don't know. But she's put her interests above my son's life, and on my control panel that is a very serious fault. I'm not going to withdraw my support for Marcos. Marcos filed for legal separation in October. He called me the same day from the office parking lot. Lucia left the house. Her parents came with a truck from Asturias. Sergio wasn't there. Where's the business genius? I asked. Still at the boarding house in Palenque. Lucia has been sending him money from the little left in the joint account. She hasn't learned anything. No, I said. Some people prefer to burn down the whole installation rather than admit the design was wrong. My son's voice sounded tired, but it was a solid tiredness. That of someone who has finished a hard day's work and knows the building is standing. My lawyer says the forensic audit will take a while. There are debts I didn't know about. Quick loans in my name with forged signatures. It's like opening a wall and discovering someone used low-gauge wires to save money and now everything is scorched. Marcos, I told him calmly, it's not your fault. You trusted who you should be able to trust. That she tampered with the meter doesn't say anything bad about you, but about her. He came to Mallorca for Christmas. Just him. We had dinner in town, walked under the Tramontana fog, and talked about the future, not courts. He told me he was looking at an offer from a logistics company in the Port of Palma. It's 40 minutes from here, he said while we parked at the estate. I know, I replied. It's a good distance to maintain the correct voltage. He looked at the house with the porch light silhouetted against the black mountain. I've been thinking a fresh start needs good soil. The soil here is hard, but if you take care of it, it can withstand whatever you throw at it. I said, He laughed. A clean laugh I hadn't heard in years. Marcos accepted the job in February. I helped him move to an apartment in Santa Catalina, in Palma, a building with high ceilings and sandstone walls he chose himself. No pressure, no other people's business opportunities. The divorce was finalized in March. Lucia kept the furniture in Madrid and a debt the forensic accountant traced to Sergio's failed company. Another $22,000 in loans she had guaranteed, compromising my son's credit. Finally, the judge ruled, and Patricia sent me the definitive email. Case closed. You are free from any charge or claim. Enjoy your estate. This past weekend, Marcos came up to the house with a new fishing rod. We were on the dock at 7 in the morning. The mist was rising from the pond, and the trout were jumping, breaking the water's mirror. Marcos cast the line with the patience of someone who has learned real results require time and a good foundation. I've been thinking, he said while reeling in, that I'm going to notice next time if someone respects what they haven't built themselves. That's the key, Dad. Lucia only valued what she could use for her own blueprint. Now you know how to read the schematics before connecting the power, I told him. We fished until 9 and then walked around the 4 hectares marking the ground for the vegetable garden we'll plant in spring. The home oak forest, the south pasture, the pond, everything was in its place. It had cost me a year of tension, but in exchange I'd gotten my son back and had taught him the most important lesson of my trade, that an installation is only safe if the foundations and the connections are honest. And he came in the afternoon with new honey. The 3 of us sat on the porch while the sun went down behind the ridge. Marcos, and he talked about fertilizers and woods for the garden's raised beds. We should use the fallen home oak for the posts, my son said, talking about this place like something that was already part of his own network. When Jordy left and the stars came out, we sat in silence. The night bird called from the grove. The frogs went about their business. Dad, Marcos said, "Tell me, I want to live like this without traps in the electrical panel, doing things right from the beginning like you." I looked at him, 33 years old, the dark circles gone, a clean gaze. "You're already doing it, son. Welcome home." We stayed outside until the mountain cold forced us inside. Marcos slept in the guest room, the same one that months ago was the center of a battle we won without a single yell, just documenting, resisting, and holding the line. Before turning off the kitchen light, I looked out the window at the dark pond and the silhouette of the Sierra against the sky. I was 64 years old. I had enough. I had my son, my estate, my trout, and the imperturbable silence of the Mallorcan winter. Exactly as I had planned, exactly as I had earned it.